Where and when were you born?
I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, in April 2002.
Are you an Aries?
I am,
Do
yes.
you identify with being a ram or a lamb?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I think of Aries people as being strong willed, confident, have ideas of their own, not easily pushed around.
Yeah, thank you.
What three words would you pick to describe yourself for someone who doesn't know you?
Um, Creative, persistent, and involved.
Okay. Do you have siblings?
I have a sibling, yeah.
Are you first or second, or what's your birth order?
I'm first, yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking because a lot of time achieving women are firstborn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a pattern. Is your younger sibling climate activist as well?
No, not really.
Why?
He just hasn't really gotten involved in stuff yet.
Are you working on him?
Yeah.
Sometimes siblings have to carve out different paths. I'm going to be the this, and you're going to be the that. So it's hard to sometimes to follow an older sibling. I'm speaking as an older sibling. So where are you in school now?
I'm a senior in high school.
And what would your dream college and major be?
I'm not sure about that exactly, but I do want to pursue like art and like animation, like interactive arts in college.
Mm-hmm. Um, do you? What are your favorite subjects so far in school now?
I would say art.
Uh huh. And what media are you particularly drawn to? You said animation.
Yeah, I really like painting and using like ink, but I also really like yeah, like and like using like Adobe Photoshop and like After Effects and Premiere to like do like motion graphics.
Great. When did you decide there's a climate crisis and I've got to do something about it? This is not a future issue. This is something I got to get involved with now.
I would say when I was about like 14. I have to open the door for my cat real quick. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. Can we see your cat?
She just left.
Oh, she's not cooperating. It's funny, and a lot of times I just finished a trilogy about visionary scientists, and every once in a while a cat would appear in the video just to say hello. It was great, including my cat. So what happened to spark your activism?
I learned about climate change. I would say like learning about it really like pushed me towards taking action.
And did you learn about it in classes or online or both?
Yeah, I learned about it in class and then I went online to learn a bit more. Yeah.
And then what made you think there's something that I can do as a teenager?
Um, I just saw like other teenagers taking action and I really I was like frustrated, so I was like there must be like something that I can do even though I can't like vote. There has to be like something I can do.
And was any kind of group active in your high school or middle school at that point?
Yeah, I was involved and I'm still involved in my environmental club in high school. Yeah, I'm the co-president right now, so we're like working to do like small actions in our high school.
Like,
Yeah.
what's an example of a small action?
We got all of the trays, our lunch trays that were styrofoam, to get turned to compostable trays at our school, and because of that, I was able to advocate for that on the county-wide level. So now most of the schools in our county are transitioning to compostable trays. We became a green school. We've been growing food for our. Well, we've started like arrow gardens for our culinary program. So our culinary program has gotten to like grow like their own like vegetables and herbs and stuff.
Does arrow mean growing in trays in water, or what does that mean?
Yeah, it's like these trays that have like light, and they have like certain ways. I'm not exactly sure how they work, but yeah.
But are they in a water medium or some or cardboard? Or I've seen different ways that they grow.
Yeah, it's like there's like water like emitted and transferred to like all the different plants.
In your environmental club, roughly how many people are active, and what percentage of those are young women?
I would say it's majority young women. Active, I would say like 15 to 20 people. Like
Um,
20 to 30 people, yeah.
and that's true around the world. I know. I talked with someone in the Philippines, and her group is about half and half, but they're older. They're like she just graduated from university. So it seems like, especially for people in high school, it's definitely young women are more involved. Do you think that's true? And if so, why?
Yeah, I do think that there has been more women involved also on like the climate movement as well because I just think that, well, first of all, like women are more affected by the climate crisis. Over 80% of people that are displaced by the climate crisis are women. So I think that
And children.
women like taking up more of the like, and I also think that patriarchy has something to do with it as well because it's like because we're seeing that like there are indigenous girls and women that are being missing and murdered and their connections like tie in with the land that they're on and that they're protecting and that they live off of, and I think that it's important because I feel like women have like this sacred like connection to the land and to earth, but it's also like we're the ones that like face like different oppression, and that oppression is different around the world. But yeah, like women do see the need for like women to step up in spaces and speak out more because we're seeing that a lot of like these groups like the fossil fuel executives and stuff are all like older white men, and it's like there's definitely like a pattern there.
Right. Um, I'm just thinking about that, though, that a lot of times when women get in power, the women who do make it up the hierarchy aren't any better. You know, I'm thinking Margaret Thatcher, Indira Gandhi, the a woman who was president of the Philippines. So somehow, if you can make it through the hierarchy, it doesn't matter what your gender is. You're kind of bought and sold. Do you agree with that or not?
um to like some extent I agree because I do think that like your identity shouldn't tie into like your politics, like meaning that like we shouldn't vote for someone for president just because they're a woman. Like I strongly believe that their like politics are like the most important thing when it comes to like supporting like a presidential candidate. Um, but I do think that there have been like quite some good leaders, but it is hard to get to like that level without like being like compromising like your values. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how AOC progresses, because she's kind of like the poster woman for progressive, feminist, outspoken supporter Green New Deal. She's kind of the beacon at this point, I would say. You agree?
Yeah, yeah, and I really really like what she's doing. Yeah.
Why do you think that Gen Z, your generation, is kind of uniquely unusual in having such young activists? What enabled your generation to be leaders?
I think that storytelling was really important. Our generation kind of grew up on like learning about like 9/11 and how like 9/11 affected the world when we were like very young, and when some like I wasn't even born when 9/11 happened. And just hearing like the stories about like the heroes in that event, but also like you know those who caused the event and everything, and like also just like storytelling through like movies and stuff, like growing up on like Pixar movies and like Harry Potter and like all of that stuff. And I just think that we've been kind of just like pushed down for a long time, and that we really like from a young age have been like fostered to like be the hero and be the ones to step up. So I do think that like our frustration has like reached an end.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of the Harry Potter series, definitely it was about smart young people solving problems that older, more educated adults couldn't. So he really was, he and Hermione were kind of expected to solve problems. But I don't understand the connection with 9/11.
Well, I just think that like our generation like grew up learning about like a tragedy and like kind of just like dealing with like the loss and just learning about like tragedies like that, and like learning from a young age that the world isn't as like innocent and wholesome as we think it is when we're children.
Mm. And Jean Twenge, who writes a lot about youth from University of California, San Diego, says that she thinks the defining moment for young people now will be the coronavirus. So it's another kind of statement of the world isn't safe.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I do think that there are multiple things that like factor into how young people are, and I think that a lot of young people have been kind of like numb to what's going on right now. Especially like I can say that I have been. Like I understand that there are a lot of people dying out in the world, but at the same time, there's just like so much information, like overload, just learning about so many terrible things. From like all the shootings that we always hear about at schools and outside of schools as well, to like to the climate crisis and to so many different natural disasters. It's like this just seems like another huge thing that's happening, and it is, but like yeah, it's been interesting. A lot of young people have been kind of like numb to the information.
Do you think that that ties in to young people not voting as much as older people? Because I know Bernie was very disheartened and sad that young people didn't turn out to vote for him, which made all the difference probably in this.
Yeah, I do think that that's disappointing that young people haven't been voting. I do know that I'm gonna go vote, and I do know that a lot of like organizers are gonna go vote. But I do know that like there are a lot of young people that think it's like too hard to vote, or it takes like too long, and like sometimes the boredom gets to us, and a lot of young people don't see like the importance in voting, and they see like importance in other things when it comes to like politics. And I think that that young people are doing better in like engaging other young people and
Using social media.
using social media, I would say.
But you know, it's easy to vote if you get an absentee ballot, vote at home, put it in the mail. So it doesn't take much time really.
Yeah, I'm not sure necessarily why people don't.
Some people say it's because they're cynical and think, why bother? It doesn't make any difference. They're all corrupt in Washington. Why should I bother?
Yeah, that could be a reason, definitely. Yeah.
Um, how did you get involved in Zero Hour?
So I'm one of the founders of Zero Hours, so I helped start the organization. Yeah.
And how did that happen? Well, tell us the story, because storytelling is key.
Yeah. Um, I I was reading like a Teen Inc. an article in Teen Inc. magazine, and it was by Jamie, and so I found her on Instagram, and I like DM'd her. Her account was public, so I DM'd her, and she got back to me, and we just started like talking, and stuff like that, and then we she had this idea to do the youth climate march. So after then, we were like, okay, let's do this idea together. And we had two other co-founders as well, Zanaji Artis and Madeline too. So they've been also like, so all four of us like started the organization.
And that was when you were 15?
Yes.
And why did you decide on a march as the first focal point?
We saw that there was we felt like there was like a missing like component almost because we were like the climate movement hasn't had like a youth led like march, and for us like marches kind of like were one of the only things that like we had like heard of at the time, you know. So it was like we didn't really know much about other actions, so that was kind of like the biggest mobilization we could think of, especially like seeing like, the women's march and everything, and seeing other marches happening. We were like, we should do a march in order to call action. Yeah.
And when was that march, and where were the best turnouts?
It was in Washington D.C. on July 21st, but we also had like sister marches in 25 other cities. So the key turnout we would say is from Washington D.C. That was like our main march.
And that was in 2018?
2018.
Uh-huh. And in the marches that you saw, roughly what percent were female?
I'm not sure exactly, but I would say like about a good number were female, but also a lot of like males were there as well.
In terms of the 0 hour leadership, it's all young women?
There are a few young men as well in our leadership, but it's majority young women. Yeah.
I looked on the 0 hour webpage, and it had 20 pictures of leaders team, and around 4 were male out of the 20.
Yeah, it's about that ratio.
Yeah, right. So how did you develop from the march? What happened there? You thought, we've got to do this, this, and this to be a real movement.
Yeah, so we like kept going. We we did keep going, and then we kept organizing. We had like a bit more structure to our organization. Kept like raising money for like future actions, and we decided to do a youth climate summit in Miami, Florida, from July 12th to 14th of 2019. So we organized that, as well as like organizing different strikes in the spring before.
And what happened at the summit in Miami? What were the themes?
Yeah, so at the summit we decided to do like it was like more of like an organizational like training. So we like trained people how to organize, how to raise money, how to do like different arts activism and stuff like that. So yeah, we definitely were training like the youth in Miami, Florida to do that.
And how many people participated face to face in Miami?
We had about 350 people.
Wow. From all over the country?
Yes, but mainly based in Florida.
And what were the themes that you stressed in the how to organize trainings?
We specifically stressed climate justice in most of them, because that's really what 0 hour is about, and our we do educate a lot about climate justice and like different systems of oppression and how they intersect with the climate crisis.
Well, then why don't you please say more about climate justice? It means including the effect on people of color, women, global south. How do you define climate justice?
Yeah, so for me, I see climate justice as like the intersections of just different systems of oppression, but really like the intersections of everything, and how the climate crisis touches like every aspect of life. And this is really like the biggest issue of our time, because it includes like every issue of time. It includes immigration, it includes healthcare, it includes gun violence, food security, homelessness. Like it really affects every issue and like exacerbates every issue, and it brings out like the worst in every issue. I would say the worst in us. And climate justice, specifically getting that justice, is about making sure that when we transition, like with the just transition, we transition to renewable energy, that we bring everyone with us, and that we're not continuing to perpetuate the systems of racism, patriarchy, colonialism, capitalism, ableism, all these systems that we're not, so many more, like we're not perpetuating those systems when we go forward, because those systems are what brought us here in the first place.
Mm-hmm. What books or thinkers or schools of thought influenced you, would you say, in developing the 0 hour approach? Like Naomi Klein, or I don't know, who were the influences?
Yeah, I haven't really read like any certain books that have made me feel that way. I haven't had like too much time to read books other than the books that I have to read for school. But like I have learned a lot from like organizing in 0 hour and like learning from our platform and reading our platform countless times has helped me like understand.
And who writes the platform?
So Kiberiti Majuto and Zarna Joshi, they both wrote our platform back in 2018.
And they were teens at the time?
Kiberiti was a young person, yes, and Zarna was an adult.
With what kind of background?
Well, she has a lot of climate justice background, like working in climate justice, like organizing and movement building. And a lot of what was written was like compiled from what we all kind of came up with as well. Not necessarily, but like we all had like some input in the platform, yeah.
Drafts probably went back and forth.
Yeah.
The trainers in Miami were all young people who led the breakout groups. The
Yes. Yeah. And some adults as well, but mainly young people, yeah.
And adults with what kind of background?
Adults in background with like lobbying and like voter registration and yeah.
So how do you do decision making in deciding the next 0 hour action or outreach, or how are decisions made like that?
Yeah, so we have like a core team of directors. We have about 10 or 11 directors, I'm forgetting, but so each director directs a team. So for example, like I'm art director, I direct our art team. Well, we have we have like a finance director, our operations director, they all direct their own team. So all the directors meet once a week, and sometimes more. And when we do that, we like are talking about like the future of the organization and like different campaigns that we want to do, just like based off of how we're organizing.
What platform do you use to meet?
Zoom.
And do you have an agenda set up beforehand, or is it just whoever has something brings it up, or how is that weekly meeting structured?
Yeah, we do have a rolling agenda that we use.
And then do you rotate facilitating, or is it just whoever wants to speak to an issue speaks? Or how I'm interested in how it's organized, because a lot of times what happens is that meetings take forever because people are talking and it burns people out and things don't get done. So I think how we organize meetings is important.
Yeah, we have a lot of different facilitators. We'll rotate facilitators, the directors will rotate. I facilitate a lot of the calls as co-executive director. So when we don't need like a specific facilitator, like facilitating a specific conversation, I'll normally step in and facilitate. Yeah.
And you can see each other and see the agenda, so you could say, okay, let's move on to item 2 on the list. Let's talk about blah blah blah.
Yeah, we all are shared on the document, so we all have access to the document. We pull it up.
And do you have someone who takes notes and records it, or how do you put things in writing?
Yeah, we do have a note taker every call, and someone like volunteers to take notes.
Like I said, my experience in activist groups is a problem is somebody talks a lot because they want to kind of be heard. It's not their goal is not to get things done, it's to be heard, and it really slows things down. So, or they get off on a tangent that's not about the topic at hand. So I'm wondering how you keep people on task in a meeting, or if that's even an issue.
Yeah, well, as facilitator, I'll like step in sometimes, or other facilitators will step in and be like, "Oh, this is, this is like, let's like move on. We've been kind of like circles, and stuff like that. So we'll like continue."
And do you do consensus decision making, or you just do majority vote, or how do you decide?
It depends on what decision we're making. So most times it's consensus, but if it's like a decision that we've been having a hard time with, we'll do like majority vote.
What's an example of something that wasn't an easy decision?
Um, I don't necessarily remember at the moment. I'm sorry.
Okay. Um, and then what do you find works in getting the word out? I mean, your image of the globe clock 10 minutes before doomsday kind of image is powerful. What else works to get people out to on the streets?
Yeah, I think social media has been like a really powerful tool in using messaging, like using like strong and bold messaging that's like blunt and just upfront has been like helpful in like educating people and getting people out.
What's an example of a strong, bold message?
I think just being like bold about like climate justice and what like capitalism has done to our world.
Hmm. I read a survey that the majority of young people favor socialism. They think capitalism hasn't worked. So that would be a theme that would resonate.
Somewhat, yeah.
Do you have any of your art that you can show us now? It's on your desk.
Um,
Political
no,
art.
not at the moment.
Okay, maybe you can send links. What images have you developed besides the clock that really resonated?
Yeah, well, I do a lot of like painting and stuff. I did a sculpture by hand with an earth melting in it, and like with that, I did an illustration of that sculpture, and that illustration is now like going around. I we put it on a T-shirt to raise some money and stuff like that. So that's another like image.
Hmm. I was in Miami in the airport, and I took pictures of secondary school students' art about the climate, and there was a lot of like melting ice cream cone symbolizing the earth. So melting seems to be a big, powerful image.
Yeah.
Um, how do you differentiate Zero Hour from like the Sunrise Movement or
Um,
Fridays for Future?
I do think that Zero Hour is more of a Gen Z movement than Sunrise. I think Sunrise is more of like a millennial group um, with some Gen Z organizers as well. I do also see Zero Hour as more like a people of color, young people and young women of color led movement, and specifically focusing on like systems of oppression and like educating people as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think of Jamie Margolin as a woman of color?
No,
But other their significant other representation.
what do you mean, like
But the people of color in the group in
Oh
the
yeah,
leadership. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, I wanted to say a word about that's a kind of like a footnote, and that is that studies show that for U.S. teens, and I'm hearing about it in other places as well, there's growing anxiety and depression. And I wonder if you, especially among girls, and I wonder if you see that among your peers, and if so, why would people, especially girls, be more anxious now?
Yeah, I do think that I'm not specifically sure about girls. Well, for girls, I do think that like the fear of like rape and sexual assault and like sexism and oppression in that way can be like detrimental to mental health. And especially for like women of color and for Black women especially, like just like the intersections of different oppression, like being a person of color and like as well as being like a woman is different. But yeah, I have seen that like my peers are yeah, we all are kind of like in the fight together. Everyone's kind of dealing with something.
Hmm.
Yeah.
See what you think of this. It seems to me the legacy of the women's movement has been that young women should be get great grades, go to great college, have a fabulous career, look good, make baby food by scratch. I mean, there's kind of this this emphasis on if you're a young woman, you should be an achiever and there's nothing stopping you, and that creates enormous pressure, especially if you're trying to do all that in high school and work and have high school activities and make your resume for college applications look good. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting viewpoint. I do think that like the women's movement hasn't been that great in the past, especially since it's left out women of color and especially Black women in their movement, and have left like Black women and other women of color behind when it came to like the suffrage movement and everything. And we've seen like kind of like the rise of like white feminism and everything. And I think that yeah, the women's movement is somewhat problematic, definitely.
But the women's movement understood that and really started stressing intersectionality and including a rainbow of voices. So they corrected themselves, I would say.
I think some people have, but I don't think everyone has.
Hmm. Um, so do you think of yourself as a feminist?
Yeah, I do think of myself as a feminist, but I try to think more about the intersections rather than just focusing only on feminism.
On gender. There also, what's kind of interesting about your generation is there's a lot of fluidity about gender. People use non-binary pronouns or say their pronouns. What do you think that says?
Yeah, well, I think saying your pronouns is important because it normalizes like spaces for people that aren't cisgender to like say their pronouns comfortably, and for it really to be normal for people to say their pronouns so people aren't misgendered. Um, and like gender is like it's interesting because it's like a concept that we like have like created somewhat because like you're like biologically like people have their sex, but like gender is like something that we've like seen as like capitalistic and something that's been made for like the profit of people and for people to be like, oh, this is a boy's product or this is a girl's product or you can't go in this bathroom because it's for girls. And it's really problematic, and it really like underlying it really definitely seems that it's been like created for profit. And it's been interesting how people like don't allow themselves to do certain things like paint their nails or do certain things because of um, like a gender, when really it's like you can do whatever you want. It shouldn't matter what gender you are.
What are your pronouns? What do you like?
Yeah, my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Um, do you think that there's a coolness factor in terms of activism in high school? A woman that I interviewed said that in high school, at least, it's not cool to be an activist. She was in Georgia, and but it's a more okay. It's more permissible for girls to be an activist than a boy. I guess a cool boy is a musician or an athlete or something. I don't know. Do you think that what's involves fitting in influences that kind of activism?
Yeah, I don't think that activism is like deemed cool necessarily. In school, at least, I haven't really. People say they're proud of me, and people will say like stuff like that, but like it's not really like I don't think it's like really deemed cool. Yeah, and I
What
don't
is
think there's
cool?
really a difference for guys and girls, at least
What
in my view.
Who are the cool people in high school?
Yeah. Well, for me, I don't really care about those things, and I don't really see those things. I do think that some people care about it, but yeah.
What about in your high school? What would someone do to be considered cool? Does that mean popular?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, my school is an interesting community because we all are mainly supportive of each other. It's not like there's any like cool or anything, but the school I go to is a little different than other schools. And yeah, so I'd say my school community is pretty like inclusive and nice to most people.
Is it a public school? What makes it different?
Yeah, it is a public school, but it's very academic, and you have to. It's a magnet school, so like everyone has to try out to get in. So there's not that many like. school fights or like that type of stuff.
Hmm. And because it's very academic, do they make efforts to include people of color?
Yeah.
Because I know in New York City, when they have those kind of academic requirements, it ends up being a lot of white kids.
I do think that there is a good amount of like diversity. It could be better, I think, at our school, but yeah, it's pretty nice.
So, are you involved now in studying for SATs and thinking about what colleges you want to apply to and that kind of pressure?
Yeah, well, I'm a senior, so I already applied to my schools, and I took the SAT last year, so there isn't that much pressure anymore. I'm just kind of waiting to hear back.
Do you mind saying what your favorite school would be if you had your choice?
No, I'd rather not.
Okay, all right. Um, um, so, what happens is, I wonder how the different youth activist groups work together. Do you work with Friday for Future? Do you work with Sunrise Movement? What international groups are you following that you think are doing the job?
Yeah, I there is a coalition in the U.S. called the U.S. Youth Climate Strike Coalition. This coalition is made of like different youth groups, including Zero Hour, and more. And it's been really nice like communicating with them and like being on like in the movement together and working together with them.
And what kind of actions have you worked on as a group?
Yeah, so those actions are mainly like strikes. We did the September 20th strike together.
Would you say that's been the biggest one so far? Last year's
Yeah.
September 20th.
Yeah.
What Earth Day is coming up? What's the next big strike and how is it planning changed because of the virus?
Yeah, so we were gonna do like a mass mobilization again for Earth Day, and it was looking to be like the biggest strike of all time so far. But I now we're moving to like a digital action, possibly like a live stream, and like yeah, so like doing more digital action and like engaging and educating people online.
So a digital action would mean simply that we would all tune in and do a training together.
I'm not necessarily sure yet.
And is this going to be a 0 hour led digital strike or is it a coalition?
A coalition.
Roughly, how much time do you spend a week on organizing?
Probably like 20 to 30 hours. It depends on like the week.
Wow. And what do you do for fun and nurture and self care in the face of schoolwork and organizing work?
I like to hang out with my friends. I do a lot of like artwork as well, like painting and stuff like that. But yeah, hanging out with my friends has been really nice.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times, climate activists get trolls, backlash, weird, mean comments. Do you get that kind of abuse, or is that not been an issue?
There's been like trolls on like Twitter and stuff like that, but I don't really like pay attention to that. But I don't really get that type of those type of like that hate from like friends or like family.
Oh no, right. But what about when you're on the street, like? Um,
No, I
oh,
haven't.
great. I talked with a woman in Australia, and she said that what she noticed is that people will walk just past them and then turn and make a negative comment and then keep walking. So they're not willing to engage. They'll just pew, fire off and move on.
Yeah,
Um,
I really faced that.
good. How do you keep the team of 20 or so, or the top 10, from burning out? Because there's a lot of pressure to do all this organizing and try to save the planet. And
Yeah, people do kind of like almost reach burnout. I think that when people do, they take time to themselves or they'll take like a break. Like I've definitely taken a few breaks in the past year, and just taking a break is like good. And that's we like encourage our organizers to take a break when they need to.
hmm when you think of yourself 5 years from now, how do you see yourself? What will you be doing?
I'm not necessarily sure, but hopefully still fighting in the climate movement as well.
Hmm. What about your feelings about optimism, pessimism? Do you think that we're going to be successful in turning this around? I guess some of it depends on whether Trump is reelected or not.
Yeah, well, I think like regardless of who's president, we're gonna have to keep fighting, especially since a lot of these systems are what's like holding up what's going on. And I'm pretty optimistic in what's going on because of like the people I work with and like just seeing the work that's happening. There's a lot of work happening, and it's yeah, like really inspiring.
Would the Green New Deal be a useful platform to changing the system, or do you have other ways of defining the kind of changes you want that are systematic?
Yeah, I definitely think the Green New Deal is like a start to making that change.
And then what would you add to that in terms? I mean, we can talk about system change, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, well, I think just having like more public access to things like transportation and like um, better access to schools and to food, and a lot of that is included in the Green New Deal as well. So, yeah.
When you think about overturning the capitalist, patriarchal, sexist system, do you have models in mind? I mean, it helps me oftentimes to look at the Nordic countries because they do a better job than any that I know of in terms of taking good care of people. But do you have models like that you think, that's really interesting?
Not necessarily. I think that this is a good like time to think of new models that we can actually think of.
Have you heard of Rojava in northern Syria? Rojava.
No.
It's it. I wrote this book, Resist: Goals and Tactics for Change Makers, and I wanted to include models. And one of the interesting ones, it's started by the Kurds, Kurds, who don't have a homeland, and it's totally feminist, totally egalitarian. Every segment of leadership, they make sure there's equal numbers of women, men, different religious, ethnic groups. They have a feminist education system, but Trump's had a call with Erdogan in Turkey, and after that phone call, because Erdogan doesn't like the Kurds, they pulled out U.S. troops, and I think a lot of those really progressive little city states in northern Syria and Rojava have been devastated. But they were a really interesting model.
That's interesting to hear about, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to add to how to be an effective organizer, how to turn this around, the role of Gen Z or young women that we haven't talked about?
Not necessarily.
Okie doke. Um,